Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
Clearly, I think we want to talk about the Simone situation. And I felt like an ambassador for gymnastics the moment that the situation with Simone happened. Right? I got 94 text messages and 18 people at work being like, what's going on? And I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts that I do want to share, but I'm curious your thoughts first because you have more of a perspective and more of an experience than I do. So what's your take on everything? And then I'll kind of give my hot take.
Yeah, I think obviously everyone's calling it the Twisties, which she's also confirmed as what it was. And I think it is connected to mental health. But I think when you say mental health, the general public has a different perception as to what it actually is when you know in gymnastics. Like I would call it more of a mental block. Obviously, it's linked to mental health, and it probably happens when you're sort of stressed or things are going on in your life. Maybe it could be linked to that for sure, but it's a mental block, and it's where your brain and your body aren't in sync. And I couldn't imagine, well, I don't think anyone could imagine a worse time for it to happen than the Olympic Games when you're picked to win 5 medals or however many it was. And I think the way she handled it, though, was just absolutely epic. Like on that team competition, she took herself out and put her pride aside and put her health and safety first and put the team first. And it was really infuriating me to see people saying she wasn't a team player and stuff like that, because she was absolutely the epitome of a team player. She sorted herself out in the back gym for a second and told whoever it was what was going on. And she was immediately back in, told the girls what was going on so they could quickly get there any events that they maybe weren't planning on doing that now they would have to. And then she was cheering for them. She was moving chalk for them. She was there for them. And you can see that from the comments they've all made, that they felt like she was supporting them all the way. So anyone that was saying that was wrong. And I think going forward, obviously, she kind of took it day by day and decided what she could and couldn't do. And I think everyone was super glad that she was able to do beam and that she was able to come out there, do a safe dismount, and to get that medal. I think that medal is going to mean so much to her rather than just a medal to add to the collection. Like the experience that she must have gone through over those few days. And not only was it happening just to anyone, like the amount of media, there was no way that she wouldn't have seen a lot of those negative comments because it was just everywhere. Obviously, there was a lot of positive comments and she's addressed those and she's thanked people for those. But when you're that famous, that popular, to escape the negative ones was probably impossible. So she's so strong to have gone out there with the pressure of the world on her shoulders and pull off a flawless beam routine with an unbelievably high double pipe dismount and get that bronze. And I'm so happy that she got that medal because after going through all of that, she more than deserved it.
Yeah, super well said. I couldn't agree more. And I think it was interesting for me because obviously of my involvement in gymnastics and also being on like the media side of it, like seeing exactly as it was happening as people were kind of interpreting it, is there's a couple things to me that I think to the lack of empathy that speak out, but also I think it speaks to a couple larger issues. So the first is that, like, for me, like even as a gymnast, like nobody has any idea what's really going on. And that's the thing that's so frustrating for me, is like when we were watching it live, like we don't know, is it like something wrong with her? Is it an injury? Is it something else? And so like, I was so blown away by how fast, like within the hour, people were assuming, jumping to conclusions, like they were just making a statement about like what they think is going on. Like you have no idea what is going on. And like the only person who knows is Simone. And even like her coaches and Cecile and her teammates around her, like they only know, and they don't even know the whole situation. So like, I don't know, I was just blown away about like people's lacking of empathy and perspective. And like, it seemed as though the people who knew the least about the situation were talking the most. Like reporters who don't ever watch gymnastics were making these brash statements about what's wrong. And I was like, that was so infuriating to me because like, you guys have no clue what's actually going on and you're jumping to conclusions. But the second point is like the Twisties are terrifying and they're super dangerous. Like, I think that's when I was trying to explain to we have a lot of like professional athletes that come to our clinic, and they were like asking me, and I was like, you ever get like caught under a wave at the beach and you don't know which way is up or down and you're tumbling and you're terrified? Yeah. Picture that times 1,000 and then possibly breaking your leg when you come out the other side. And everyone's like, oh, I get it now. I was like, yeah, it's very, very, very dangerous. Like, and that was for me frustrating for also is because like, don't get me wrong, other sports are hard, other sports are dangerous, but like when you're throwing a baseball, it's not like your shoulder's going to like explode if you throw a ball, right? If you don't hit a strike and you don't hit it right on the mark, it's not like your shoulder's going to absolutely implode and you're going to be injured, right? But like we know people have gotten serious injuries, especially on vault, catastrophic injuries where they've become paralyzed or broken their legs. And like, I think people lack that perspective too. Like, unless you're a gymnast who's been through that, particularly at the high level, I don't think I have any shred of understanding what Simone's going through. Like, I don't think you really have a leg to stand on to criticize, because you've never done it. You know what I mean? You've never been through that situation. So I don't know. Those two things were first to me, but is there anything else on those that you agree with, or do you think is different about that? Because I think the lacking perspective and empathy is the most mind blowing to me.
Yeah, 100%. I can't fully remember who it was, but I think it was another well-known athlete that said that pressure is a privilege, as a sort of dig. And that's a tennis player, I'm pretty sure, that said it. And I was thinking, what's the worst that can happen in tennis? What, you get hit by the ball, or I don't know, your racket breaks. Like, nothing that's going to endanger your life or you could become paralyzed from. So I just think, yeah, people were speaking out of turn that just have absolutely no idea. But also, someone that is a high level athlete in another sport should kind of show respect. And also, like, if you aren't sure what can go wrong in gymnastics and you do want to find out more, then you could just Google it. And like you said, there's been people paralyzed and even lost their lives due to a serious injury that they've incurred doing gymnastics. And also, Simone's skills, they're not even, it's not like, oh, she's getting lost in a full twist. She's getting lost in a triple twisting double back. Like, that is absolutely no joke. So I think if you're getting lost in a full twist or something, there's a danger for sure. But if you're getting lost in a triple twisting double back on a hard ground, like, that's a whole nother level. So I'm glad that she felt that she had the voice and the strength to be able to tell her team in that moment, and that they listened to her. I think that speaks volumes, because they could have also said, like, no, let's at least warm up bars, or they could have pressured her into even trying another event. So it was really good to also see that she has that voice and she's respected by her coaches and her team, that they listened and they took her seriously and they allowed her to step back when her physical health was in danger, as well as obviously the mental side of things, and they understood the dangers of that.
Yeah, that was very encouraging to me, is obviously, like, her incredible, courage to step out in a position where she's got the weight of the world on her shoulders, but to see that cultural change where she was able to speak up and say, no, I don't feel comfortable. And somebody, like, they respected it. That was very encouraging to me, because I don't know if that would have happened 10 years ago. I don't think that would have been a situation where somebody felt comfortable. And yeah, I think the biggest thing that I think is the most frustrating is in this situation, it speaks to a problem I think we have with athletics as a whole, and particularly in gymnastics, is that I felt like, on the media, on the American media side, for some people, not everybody, there's a lot of positive support, but it felt like so many people were like, if you're not winning gold first every time, all the time, it's like, it's not good enough, and you get thrown to the side. Like, Simone's been incredible for the last, like, however many years she's been so dominant. And like, now the moment there's a slip up, people are so fast to jump on her. And like, I felt like she was put in like an impossible situation, right? Like, that people expect you to sacrifice your physical health and get hurt or possibly seriously injured for a gold medal. Like, their expectation of like that gladiator mindset that, like, kill yourself at all costs, no matter what, as long as you get a gold for USA. Like, her options were impossible. It was like, compete and get hurt, right? And then what happens? Like, she gets hurt, right? And everyone's like, oh, that's a bummer. And they move on with their life. And then she's stuck with this horrific injury, right? Like, that's so unfair. It's like selfish of someone to ask that of her. But then also, like, what's the other options? She competes even though she's off. She has a terrible competition. They get fifth. Everybody blames Simone because it's Simone's fault. She tanked under the pressure. Or she does what she does and she pulls out for her own health, which is the right option. And they criticize her and they go, like, there's no way to win. You're either winning gold all the time, no matter what, or it's not good enough. And you get absolutely just chastised constantly. Like, it's impossible. It's an impossible situation. That's why I felt so bad for her, because of that, because there's no out. There's no possible out.
In two ways, it was like the best and the worst person for it to happen to. Best because now there's just this whole new conversation. And I think young gymnasts are going to see that and take strength from it. And hopefully, if they find themselves in a competition and they've got something along the same lines as the Twisties happening, then they know. Simone Biles could have won 5 medals at the Olympic Games, but she decided, no, my mind's not in the right space. I'm going to tell my coaches, my team, and take a step back. So hopefully she's empowered lots of young gymnasts and gymnasts older like me as well alike. And she's also just sort of showed the world just how tough this sport is. And hopefully brought a lot of the general public to understand more of what goes on in a gymnast's head and how hard the sport is. And then obviously I said the worst person for it to happen to, because of the amount of media attention and pressure that brought to her. Because obviously I was thinking, even if it happened to another one of the US gymnasts, it just wouldn't have had that same blow up effect, I don't think. I think it would have just been a few articles written about it, but kind of like that was it. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. And I think also, I think that the situation in general is so, I mean, it just takes a crazy amount of courage for her to do that, but also is like the ripple effect. I don't think that everyone sees, like, if you're in gymnastics and you understand the culture and you're in it, right? You really understand what's happened the last 4 years in particular, and beyond that with our culture, you realize the magnification of how important this is. Because like you said, the ripple effect is that some teenager gymnast somewhere is going to be at a competition and her leg's going to hurt or they don't feel comfortable, and they're going to say, no, I don't feel comfortable doing this. And they can speak up and do that. Where I think for so long, it's been the opposite, where it's assumed that you're just going to bury your pain and keep going. And that mental blocks are just work through it, keep going. But like, yeah, for some young girl or some young boy to see Simone do that on the world stage at the biggest moment of her life, possibly for athletics anyways, is incredibly encouraging for someone to have like a, like I said earlier, like, unfortunately in gymnastics, nothing changes all the time until they see some of their heroes do it, until they see people, doing what they want to see lived out. So I think a lot of people are going to have a positive ripple effect because of that. But like you said, also with the mass media is negative because Simone goes under so much for that. But at the same time, the mass media amplifies the real conversation, which is like, athletes are not just there for your entertainment. Like, they're people, they're humans with real lives and real feelings. And they're not, like, it's selfish as a consumer of sports to just expect everyone to perform all the time, no matter what, to keep you entertained. It's like, no, these are people with lives, and, they have a say in what they obviously want to do. And so for them to be able to speak up, I think it changes the narrative quite a bit, which is kind of just like, athletes at all costs should do whatever they need to do to win. And I think that, again, is a huge cultural piece that people don't understand is so important in gymnastics right now.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't put it better, really, what you've just said about doing everything at all costs to win. Well, no, that's not the most important thing. And Simone's clearly demonstrated that. And also, obviously, we both gave the example of if it's happening in a competition, but even just if you get some mental block in training, now I think people are going to feel more empowered to speak up, tell their coaches what's going on. And even coaches, seeing it happen to the greatest of all time, hopefully that can give them a bit more empathy towards gymnasts when it's happening, because obviously it's frustrating for both coach and gymnast when it does happen, but they can sort of say, okay, like, this happens to even the best, so we can work through this. And I think it's just really a horrible situation, but it has some silver linings for that.
Yeah, and there's an interesting comment, a positive comment that said, how the Olympics is always so incredible because obviously it brings the entire world together. It's one of the only events that brings the entire world together, but also it very often transcends sports itself into like life lessons and stuff like that. And there's so many examples of stories of people who have, done things that are impactful on the world stage. And I think this is a really big example because, as we see in gymnastics, obviously the tide shifting towards a new kind of approach to our training ideas, we also see this bigger conversation about mental health. And like you said, mental health is linked to it, but this was like a physical danger situation. This was a risking. I think it's equal parts a mental health conversation with the pressure, but it's also a topic of conversation about, risking yourself at all costs, right? Like, don't get me wrong. If you're an adult, if you're over 18, you're an adult and you can make your own decisions if you want to compete and train, especially with like some of the stuff that happened, but like, you need to make your own decisions. And I think previously, before this and some other examples, athletes didn't feel as though they had a choice to say something, especially if they're on a squad, right? And like, that was the other thing that really pissed me off is people were like, you should have known about this, a week before, 2 weeks before. It's like, well, if you actually understood gymnastics, you would realize, like, blink of an eye, this happens. Like, so it's not something that Simone like knew. I mean, again, I'm assuming. And she was just like, oh, I'm just going to conveniently mention it, during the team finals. Like, no, like, she clearly wants to compete. And so I think the bigger transcendent piece is like, athletes being able to speak up for like, no, I don't feel comfortable, or like, I don't want to risk serious injury for the sake of like the team and stuff. And again, I think it's selfish by the consumer or by the media who doesn't understand that, to expect an athlete who even makes an Olympic team and is on the squad to be like, yes, break your leg for the better of the country. Please break your leg. Risk breaking your leg to getting a gold medal because America, and it's like, dude, come on. That's unbelievably, it's awful. It's inhumane to ask an athlete to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I can 100% vouch for her because I was obviously training with her the whole week, and she was training perfectly the whole time. And then obviously she's also come out and said it literally happened that day in the warm-up. So yeah, and we both know from experience that the twisties or any sort of mental blocks, they literally come out of the blue. Sometimes you think it was just one turn, so then you'll be like, oh, it was just like a one turn. But then, like how it has been with Simone, it can then transcend onto every single skill and every single apparatus. So you just never know. It could literally be one tumble that's affected, or it could be your entire repertoire of skills.
Yeah. And I think people who didn't understand gymnastics were like, well, why can she do beam? Is she like, now she's coming back just for the attention, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you guys have no idea. You guys have no idea. I vividly remember I was Zooming with my teammates in college and stuff. We were talking about this stuff. And I remember I got the twisties really bad when I was like 14 or so, trying to learn, like go from 1.5 to double to 2.5 on floor. And I was like run to, I'm like, all right, just a layout would be a full. I was like, wait a minute, that wasn't good. And they're like, all right, just a 1.5, 1.25 to my side. Like people like really misunderstand like how brutal it is. And I think the other thing is like the twisties sound so innocent and stuff like that. But I was just doing like double fulls and stuff, and it was terrifying. And I almost got hurt multiple times. But have you had them too? Have you had twisties before?
Yeah, mine was similar to yours. It was like every time I went to just do a layout, I would twist. And even now, like I had that one so many times growing up that then now I just don't do layouts. I just always go straight to double twist. Even full twist, I'm like, just on tumbling, because obviously I do a full twist off the beam. That's why it just doesn't even make sense, because you're like, yeah, I can do a layout here, or I can do a layout on vault, easy, and I can do a full off the beam. But if you run into it on tumble, no, let's go straight to double twist. So for me, I just avoid it now. But obviously, if it's happening in your actual competition skills, you can't avoid it. So.
Yeah. And I also think, the point to drive home is so important, is like other sports are dangerous. Don't get me wrong. Like in America, it was like everything was compared to football and baseball. Everyone's like, oh, the pressure of this and Tom Brady. And it's like, yes, but like the danger level is so high. Like it's so incredibly high, and the mistakes are catastrophic, possibly. Like the margin of error is so small, but the consequences are so high. And I think that was what most people in the mainstream media who had never, people who like don't even care about gymnastics and never cover gymnastics, all of a sudden were experts. Like I'm watching like talk show radio hosts have this like hot take. I'm like, dude, you've literally never watched gymnastics in your entire life. And you can tell by the way you're talking about it. They had these like hot takes on like why she was doing it, what was wrong, and saying all these insane things about her. I'm like, dude, go try a standing backflip into a pit and let me know how it goes. And like, then we'll keep talking after the fact,
Well, you obviously just brought up baseball and football. So it even infuriates me to be compared to a team sport, because Miss Val used to always say to us, obviously in a team sport, you can pass the ball. So if you're having a bit of a off day or whatever, you don't need to take that shot or whatever it is, you can pass the ball on. Whereas in gymnastics, obviously in other sports too, you're literally out there on your own. But I also spoke about tennis earlier. The dangers are just different, not as high risk. Obviously, not to take away from any other sports. They're all very impressive and you have to work really hard to get to the top. But when we're talking about dangers, gymnastics has got to be one of the most dangerous, if not the most dangerous, especially when something's going wrong.
Yeah. And I think the other point to go back to is I think the most impressive to me was the courage and the humility for her to say, this is not my day. I don't have this, whatever. But what allowed that to happen is Jordan and Grace and everybody to shine through, and Suni to have an incredible performance, right? And completely knock the doors off and get us over and do amazing. And then also, but like the other opportunities that came up because of Simone saying like, this is not my day to step back. Like that's the amount of like selflessness that has is incredible. Whereas I think in some other situations, maybe somebody would continue to try to push through that and maybe, I don't know, compromise the opportunities of other people. Like that's extremely inspiring for me to be like, the team is more important than me right now.
Yeah. And especially going back to the team competition, probably her coming out there and then giving them the pep talk allowed them to then shine and do those good performances. And she believed in them that they could get a medal without her. And then they went and proved that. So I think she was just as much of a team player and a team leader in doing that role. And obviously they pulled it off. So I think that goes to show how encouraging she was in that role.
Yeah. And I think that's the other piece too, is that was frustrating was a lot of the comments, especially like on ESPN or things that are not specifically gymnastics on social media. They would put like, Simone wins bronze, for beam or whatever, like Team USA wins silver. And they were like comments like, oh, we're celebrating silver and bronze now. I'm like, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like, again, the problem of like, if you're not winning gold all the time, like people think it's a failure. And it's like, dude, second in the world. Yeah. Pretty good. Compared to you, like being out of breath, tying your shoes. Yeah. You're not really what you speak.
Yeah. Like at the Olympic Games during a pandemic. And yeah, like you said, you're at home sitting there eating your popcorn or whatever on your sofa, and you're you feel like you've got the right to criticize. Like, no.
Yeah. especially with what we talked about before of like your 10-year journey, right? To get to the Olympics. Like most people don't dedicate anything in their life for 10 years, towards a common goal. And I think I don't know, maybe just because I know a lot of athletes and I work with a lot of athletes who are of that caliber, like I have much more empathy for them. And it's like, you have to see the human beyond just the athlete, whether it's a gymnast or not, because man, if you really knew, and this was a really good point my boss made, is that back to the point of you have no idea what's going on in someone's life, right? You never do, especially with mental health. And this, thank goodness this didn't happen in a situation, but like, what if like Simone had made a decision not to compete, or any athlete had a decision not to compete, and like everybody just completely rails apart on, right? But then like the next day they come out and say something tragic happened to a family member, or something, I got awful news about something, right? And now you probably feel like a jerk because you didn't know the whole situation. So like, we have no idea. Maybe something else is going behind the scenes. And I hope nothing is wrong, but like, you never know what someone's going through. And then maybe you find out more, and you should rightfully feel like a little bit of a jerk because you jump to conclusions. And so like, again, we have no clue what's going on, and none of us can judge. None of us can criticize. All these reporters are just assuming, jumping to conclusions. Like it's completely out of line.
Yeah. And I will actually say Jamaican fans have a really, really great outlook there. Even before anything came out about my injury or before my performance, I got so many comments from Jamaican fans saying, we're proud of you for representing us. Thank you for representing us. And I just find that so lovely. And then after, when I just did my short bar routine, if you can call it a routine, same thing, just so many comments of just people being positive, like, thank you for representing us. And yeah, it's just so lovely. And I think more fans of sports need to take on that mindset. Obviously with Jamaica, it's different from the USA, where you're so competitive in the USA in every single sport. But I think everyone needs to take that step back and, like you said, understand the hard work and the dedication it took to get there, and just congratulate people. I don't know why it's so hard.
I know. Yeah. I try to share that with people too. I'm like, man, if you take time out of your day to go into a comment section on ESPN's thing and say like, you're a quitter, blah, 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 you suck. Like, you should really reevaluate your life. Like, I'm sorry, like that your life is in such a rough spot that you feel the need to rip athletes apart in the comment section while you sit in your couch. But like, man, like, come on, like we're better than this as a society. Like, it doesn't matter, sports, not sports, whatever. Like, just be a little bit better as a human. And I do hope that whether it's Simone or anybody else on social media, athletes, like, does realize that in all the sea of negativity that's louder on social media. But yeah, there's a lot of positive support. There's a lot of people who are thankful and grateful and support you for all this in Jamaica, especially when it comes terms to like taking a step back and putting your own health first and all that kind of stuff. Because I know far too many athletes where they take the riskier situation, they get hurt, and then the media storm goes away, and it's just like, okay, now, well, they're stuck with an injury. They're stuck with a lifelong injury because something happened. And it's like, people don't see that. People don't see the other side of the coin.
Yeah. And that's why it did also make me so happy to see her address the positive comments that she was receiving, because it was like, okay, I'm glad she's not just sifting through the negative and getting into a hole. So yeah, I think as well, we've said it a few times, but I think the support system she's got around her, in her coaches and her teammates and whoever else, is really strong. They helped to get her back out there for the beam, and I think we're all grateful for that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that definitely goes to the credit of, again, I think I see it a lot in, Jade and her dad and like their coaching relationship and how positive that was and how they've been amazing to her, and especially Riley, like, before the Olympics, but also just the incredibly important role of coaches and support systems for people who are in that situation. Because God, I can't even imagine having to navigate that situation on your own. Can you imagine like if she had a situation where the coaches weren't as awesome and as friendly and like understanding, and the team around her wasn't it and stuff? Like, that is a nightmare. That's an absolute nightmare. So kudos to her and her support staff and her teammates for being understanding, because I mean, that's literally like, you could argue in terms of athletics, that was like when the moment you're supposed to be at your best, you have your worst possible day on a public stage when everyone's staring at you. Like, that's awful. That's very, very hard to go through.
Yeah, definitely. And I think she's lucky that she landed that vault as safely as she did.
Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely. She was like looking the other way from when I interpreted it. When I was like, oh man, I know exactly what's going on there.
Yeah. God, the pure fear, and just imagine all the emotions she felt after that as well. Like, she probably just thought like a few swear words. Then, like, what do I do now, kind of thing.
The benefit of having a mask, right? You can put your mask on and let loose some cuss words.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we addressed this, because again, I felt like an ambassador for gymnastics of 1,000 people, but a lot of people will listen to this and hopefully understand and hopefully share, the real perspective of yourself, who's a gymnast who gets it.